This is iCave Answers, where I answer your Apple questions. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell. First up, Pokemon Scarlet 18 asks, iCave Answers, what can we expect with the iPhone 16 lineup? Will we finally get an iPhone Ultra? So, the iPhone 16 lineup, I think, is going to be an interesting one. It does not look like there's going to be a huge amount of changes in terms of the hardware. That's what we're hearing, the latest information from Mark Gurman. Don't expect big changes. I wouldn't expect much change to the displays. It sounds like they're going to be fairly similar to what we have right now. The rumours we've had about iPhone Ultra, honestly, it doesn't make any sense to me. I think now that we've already had the price changes that we were expecting already, I don't think Ultra is going to be a thing for the iPhone. We've got titanium, we've got the bigger size, we've got everything that you would expect from an Ultra, other than some people were saying more battery life, but that just means making it bigger and bulkier and thicker, which actually nobody really wants, because everyone's complaint with the last iPhone, the 14 series, was it was too heavy because of the stainless steel. So now they've gone to titanium, it's lighter, everyone's said how great that is. Doesn't make any sense to make it much thicker and just chuck more battery in there. Don't think it's going to happen. Pokemon Scarlet 18 asks, iCave Answers, can we get some stand-up comedy from you on this channel? Thanks. So I'm not going to be just changing to doing regular stand-up comedy, but I am going to be showing the video that I shot when I did my stand-up. So yeah, let's say we'll put it out at the weekend. How does that sound? Pokemon Scarlet 18, iCave Answers, did you buy the M3 Max MacBook Pro? If not, why not? Because A, budget, and B, I don't need it. There's really no reason that I need to have that to do what I do. For everything that I do news content, I do quite quick videos. It's not super heavily edited. I throw on a bit of a color correct, and I do a bit of chop editing and a bit of B-roll, and we're done. So there's no real reason that I need like a mobile Mac Pro. Just not something that I need, and I certainly don't need to spend $4,000 on it. Martin J. Clayton asks, iCave Answers, are M series chip updates heading towards an annual cycle as you predicted? Why, thank you for noticing. It does seem that way, and I've always said that I think this is what Apple wants to do. We have now skipped one generation. There's no M-series chip that is based on the A16 cores. That is the one generation that has not been included. And obviously in the past, with things like the A12 X and A12Zs, there were no A13 Xs or Zs. The M1 is what would have been the A14X, so they did kind of jump generations every so often, so that they could have that 18-month cadence for updates. But I maintain that it makes far more sense if they're making the cores to be able to update the Macs more often. There may be some generations, like the iMac, where they will miss out because there's no real need. If there's no big jump in performance, then maybe they can kind of go without, but it would just make sense to make more universal boards as well. That would be something I think Apple should look at, especially in the iPads. The iPad mini, the iPad regular could use the same board and, you know, hand me down from the mini. It's going to be a smaller board than they're used to using now, but that gives more space for battery. If they can make it small enough for a mini with the quicker chip, then they can put that into the iPad regular once it gets to that point, if that makes sense, because the I/O is the same. They're using very broadly the same kind of displays. All that kind of stuff is basically the same, so there's no real reason that they shouldn't. And they should do the same with the MacBook Pro 14-inch with the M3 chip. That board should be able to then be transplanted into the MacBook Air, and potentially even into the iMac, with obviously the different power supply attached to it, and the same with the Mac Mini. I mean, there's no reason that they couldn't do this and then have an I/O board that they keep for the Mac Minis. That might make sense. These are just ways that Apple could really reduce the amount of work that they need to do each year, so that we can get those annual updates, because why not? It's always nice to have a fresher computer when you decide you want to buy one. And with the M2 Pro and M2 Max to the M3 Pro and the M3 Max has been like, what, 9 months? It's pretty quick. I feel like the previous one was maybe delayed a bit because it was going to be annual, like I said in the first place. 2Kinetics Media asks, iCave Answers, M3 family of chips is currently only available in machines with active cooling. We know that the A17 Pro can run a little hot. Do you think we'll see an M3 in iPad and MacBook Air, or will there be an underclocked or binned version for fanless devices? M3 is going to be absolutely fine in those, don't worry. There was a little bit of an issue originally with the A17 Pro, but that was not actually to do with the chip, it was to do with software optimization. and it seemed to be apps like Instagram and Uber that hadn't been updated properly to take advantage of the new stuff. So it caused a few issues, like from day one. I don't think there's anyone having problems with overheating on iPhone 15s at this point. Not hearing anything about it these days on the iPhone 15 Pros. So I don't think there's going to be any issues with that. Good observation though. But yeah, it'll be absolutely fine. People have even suggested that they might be looking at putting an M3 Pro into the iPad Pro. No, they will not be doing that. Pretty certain on that. Two Kinetics asks, iCave answers, do you think that the next version of macOS will drop support for Intel Macs now that the transition is complete and there's a range of entry-level Macs to tempt people on older Macs? I don't think that they're going to drop support for Intel Macs on the next version. The reason for that is that people have still been buying Intel Macs up until 2020, 2021. And that just isn't really fair because typically Apple gives 6 to 7 years of new operating system versions. Now what I do think is that it's going to carry on the way that it has already, and you're going to get less and less of the features that come with each operating system upgrade that are compatible, but the actual name and the new wallpapers and you know, a handful of new bits will probably still come to the Intel Macs. But like from Big Sur, Intel Macs couldn't run iPhone or iPad apps. So I do think that Apple is obviously moving away from the Intel Macs very quickly, but I don't think it's actually that they're just saying you can't have this because it's Intel. I think there's actually issues where the Intel machines wouldn't perform particularly well with some of these features because of the power requirements, all that kind of thing. And a lot of stuff is also run by the neural engines in the Apple Silicon chips. That's the other difference. Team Kinetics asks, iCave answers, M3 was being mostly compared with Intel Macs and M1 generation. Was this to cover a modest performance boost over the M2s? Not in particular. I think we kind of expected that they would compare M1 to M3 with the iMac in particular, which is why I assumed that the iMac would be one of those machines that got updated to M3, because they do like to skip a generation if they can. It does make it look better, but let's be honest, it's basically twice as fast as the M1, which is stupidly fast anyway, and there was only about a 20% jump from M1 to M2, 22%, something around that. So that's a big jump regardless of what you're comparing it against. They're also comparing him against Intel because they do want people to keep moving away from Intel machines, because if you've got an Intel machine and you haven't experienced Apple Silicon yet, my goodness, you are in for a treat. Aziz Rahman 1 asks, iCave answers, why do you think the new MacBook Pros still start with 8GB of RAM? Because it is an M base chip. It's an M3 chip. It's not an M3 Pro or an M3 Max. 8 gigs is absolutely fine for an M3. It only has to support one external display, so it's 2 displays in complete total, and that memory is unified, so it is used for graphics and for general program memory. And honestly, 8GB is far more than most people need, and I know we are talking to geeks here. We are talking to people that will run silly amounts of things. My whole setup here is run on an M1 base model Mac Mini, which has 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. My MacBook Air, which is sitting right here, which is literally recording this show over continuity camera right now, has 8 gigs of RAM. A little bit more storage because I thought it would be handy if I'm out and about and I don't want to plug external drives into this thing. So yeah, you don't need more than 8 gigs for normal people stuff. For geek stuff and for people that want to be power users and keep loads of apps running at the same time, fair enough. But 8 gigs is very usable, and with the swap that Apple uses and memory compression and things like that, it does work far better than 8 gigs of RAM would on a Windows machine. Thank you for watching, and if you've got a question, iCave answers down in the comments. Use the hashtag so that I know to answer it in a future video. Thanks to the Patreons. We'll see you in the next one. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.